Like I see people that foam roll and they're doing it all wrong. More strength, more blood flow, better balance.
So I want one of these.
You definitely want one of those. Do you remember in one of our episodes we talked about the knot, release, stretch, activate? This can become really handy.
Let's talk about heat. How does that work?
To make vessels larger. Simply put, to bring more blood flow into an area.
Vibration. What's the difference between this that does vibration and this that does?
Okay. Well, all you got to do.
Welcome to GV Gems. We've had a few people asking us to talk about some of the tools, some of the treatments that Gary's talked about on episodes like basketball and tennis. So on the episode on basketball, Gary was talking about how to use one of these balls to sort of work on the sort of smaller muscles around this area. So I'm going to pass it over to Gary to talk a little bit about when to use a massage ball.
Okay. So I think what you haven't said, this isn't just a ball. It's a vibrating ball. You can also do this with a ball, but it's better if you have a ball that has vibration to it. And vibration has been around for a long time. Actually, to my knowledge, anyway, it was initiated with astronauts going into space and using vibration to maintain muscle tissue and even bone tissue, because they were, afraid that they'd have bone loss, osteoporosis, osteopenia in space. And probably more recently, when I say recent, I don't know what that means, maybe the last 20 years or so, we're seeing more and more of vibration in sports. Probably started out with a power plate, okay, meaning total body vibration, like you get on this plate and it vibrate your whole body, okay. And then, interestingly enough, like a lot of technology, as time goes on, things get smaller, faster, and cheaper. Okay, and we went from these vibrating plates to now vibrating balls, vibrating belts, vibrating guns. Okay, and there's kind of there's not kind of, there is a difference between this type of vibration and this type of vibration. Okay. So this type of vibration is probably the best word I could use is more like an oscillation, meaning the vibration's kind of going this way. And then this type of vibration, which maybe we should call it percussion, is more of a pistoning type. Okay, so question is why not just use a ball? Why use a vibrating ball? And why would you use a ball over a gun, or a gun over a ball? Okay. I think if we address things that way, we kind of get to, why we doing this thing, how are we going to do it, and why are we doing it? Okay. So let's go to the ball, and you can actually do some of these releases with a non-vibrating ball, and in my world we just call it a lacrosse ball, because somehow lacrosse has a ball that's kind of just the right size. This seems to be a little bit bigger than a lacrosse ball, which in some ways is better because you can do more things with it. But a lot of the releases that we would do are hip flexor releases. Okay, this part of your body right here, and that lacrosse ball fits perfectly right there. Now this is a little bit bigger, but not too big that you can't use it right here. And then it also vibrates. So if you can do it with a lacrosse ball that doesn't vibrate, then why would we want to have a vibrating ball? What does this do that the other ball doesn't do? Okay, that's the key question. Now, what we're really trying to do is get a release. Okay, do you remember in one of our episodes we talked about the knot, what we called adhesion, what you call a knot, and then we use a foam roller or a ball lacrosse ball, and because we talked about the contractile tissue, but under the contractile tissue is made up of sliding
Yeah.
protein bands,
I do
okay, they
indeed.
get caught on each other.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why we do use these things. One of the reasons why we use these things to release those knots or adhesions, as we call them. Now, what we can do with a vibrating ball that we can't do with just a lacrosse ball is we can get more firing. Okay, have you ever heard the term action potential?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. An action. Okay. I like throwing these things out to you. Okay. By the time we're done with these podcasts, you're going to write a book, right? So that everybody can understand what I'm talking about. An action potential is sort of nothing more than the electrical current of a nerve firing a muscle.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mm.
That's how muscles fire,
Okay.
right? You have electricity in your body and it hits what we call a synapse and if you know, and an axon, and then it fires the muscle, and then the muscle fibers shorten, and as a result, you're able to move this arm from here to there.
Okay.
Okay. That's the action potential. For some reason, the way God created us, that if we vibrate and there's a certain level of vibration, okay, that you can't be too much, it can't be too little, okay, to activate it. I don't know what those numbers are. Somebody does. I've read them, but I don't really pay attention to them. Um, you rely on the fact that it's the right vibration level, and it is. I can tell you because it works. Okay, so what happens is you get this vibrating ball,
Mhm.
okay, and it creates this action potential, okay, and it starts to excite these nerves where they fire the muscle fibers
Mm.
and the microscopic muscle fibers,
Okay.
okay? And so what's happening is it's recruiting more muscle fibers into a muscle contraction.
Okay.
Okay, so what that means is that when I fire this muscle, it doesn't mean that every fiber that's in this muscle is firing when the nerve tells it to fire.
Okay.
Okay. There's enough of them to create the contraction and
Okay.
move your arm. But the more fibers that we can recruit,
Mm.
okay, the more efficient, the stronger, the more endurance is going to create. Okay.
Okay.
And so when you're watching these professional athletes do the things that they do, and trust me, they make hard stuff look easy.
Mm.
Okay, but their bodies are operating on a much higher level than the rest of us.
Mm.
Okay. They're getting more recruitment of muscle fibers and they're getting them in patterns. Remember, we talked about the diagonal, they're
Yep.
getting them in the patterns that they need to fire in. And that's what vibration helps with.
Okay.
Okay. It helps for a more synchronous firing of motor units. Okay. I know it's wordy, but I'll say it again, a more synchronous meaning they're all coming together at the same time.
Yeah.
They're all firing, more synchronous firing of motor units. A motor unit would be one fiber. So we're getting more fibers in that muscle contraction. If we have more fibers, we have more strength, we have more power, we have more endurance. We're able to create better balance. If you have more muscle fibers firing, you have more strength. You also have more balance. Okay, and there seems to be a lot of data that would support increased blood flow. Okay,
Okay.
okay, and increased bone mass. Remember, I talked about the astronauts.
Yeah.
Okay, now the science is there. And that's not saying that there doesn't need to be more research.
Mm.
Okay. So there does. But there's enough data out there to support this, and I'm a very data driven athletic trainer,
Mm.
especially with the group that I work with, especially Kobe Bryant.
Mm.
GV, what are we doing? Okay. All right. Why are we doing it? Okay. How are we going to do it? Right. You want to know everything. And I loved that about him. At first, it was like, okay, every time we got to do this. Okay. But what was great about Kobe is that he was intellectually brilliant,
Mm.
not only about everything he did, but about his body. He wanted to know. And I realized that the more you know, okay, the better off you can execute these types of things, as opposed to just saying, here's the ball, go knock yourself out. You know what I mean? And it's your body.
Yeah.
You're in charge of it.
Okay.
Okay. You should it should be more than just, well, they say this works and that's why I'm doing it.
Mm.
Okay. Well, why does it work?
Yeah.
Okay. And you can have an intelligent conversation, even if it's only with yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. That you're saying, okay, and I know I'm doing this wrong because I don't have it in the right place. Which I guess that's a good segue, because you were asking me about, so we were talking about the bands earlier, about firing your glute.
Yep.
And then we talked about the a lot of people do that, but not a lot of people fire the glute med.
Yeah.
And we talked about the clamshell.
Yeah.
Okay. It'd also be a good idea to use the ball to do a release
Yeah.
before you activate, because we always talk about the releases
Okay.
before the activation. And you could use this also all the way down your leg, because where this glute med is, that turns into a structure, you get real wordy, called the tensor fascia lata. That turns into the IT band. The IT band crosses your knee joint. A really tight IT band will cause friction on the outside of your knee and give a lot of people a lot of pain. It's a
Okay.
very uncomfortable thing. So if you can release that, then stretch it, the way we talked about releasing and stretching and activating the glute.
Yeah.
Okay. And in that order, release, stretch, activate. Okay. This can become really handy.
Okay.
Okay.
So vibration, I get it.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between this that does vibration and this that does?
Okay. Well, all you got to do, this is a round head and this is round, but look at the difference in size.
Yeah.
Okay. That's part of it. The other part is I think I mentioned this. If not, this is what we call oscillation. It goes this way, where this one is more pistoning. Okay.
Okay.
So we're going to get a lot of fiber recruiting, which we talked about, recruiting more fibers into a more synchronous, okay,
Yep.
muscle fiber
Firing in
recruitment and
the
firing patterns the right way.
Yep.
Okay. This is more when we were talking about the knot or the adhesion.
Okay.
Okay. So we're activating and recruiting more muscle fibers into a contraction here.
Yep.
Okay, to get a more synchronous firing of muscle units,
Yeah.
to get more strength, more power, more endurance, more blood flow, better balance, all that stuff.
So I want one of these.
You definitely want one of those.
Okay.
You want a ball. Now, I like this ball.
There
Okay.
are other balls on the market.
There's lacrosse balls. I don't know if you're going to find a better one than this, but
Yeah.
if you can't afford one of these, get yourself a lacrosse ball, but get a ball.
Yep.
All right. But this is more of a pistoning, where, like, I see people that foam roll and they're doing it all wrong. They roll, 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 and they think it's sort of like massage. That's not the way you foam roll. The way you foam roll is to roll, and then when you feel that sort of tender spot that you just rolled over, stop on that tender spot,
The
knot,
Okay.
and then sink into that tender spot.
Okay.
And your weight with gravity, hopefully you're trying to release the knot, the strands of protein that are caught on each other. Okay. You're trying to pull them apart. Now, when you get, and there's tons of guns out there, but like what I would look for in a gun is several things. Rechargeable, and does it hold its charge? Okay. Portable, can I take it with me? Okay. Different heads. Okay. There are some different heads depending on what you're trying to do. Okay. And is it easy on the practitioner, even if you're the practitioner? How does the vibration go to where it's supposed to go, and not in your hand and all the way up your arm? Which is, I don't know how they did it, but somehow, there's other guns out there. I was involved with the developing of the first ones. And this, when I saw this really came to another level. My problem with this is getting it away from my wife, all right, when I need it. All right. So anyway, did that answer? Did we get to the promised land?
So let me in my words, okay? So I can remember you were sort of saying that your muscles are like this, and then they contract, and when they do, this is a knot. And then with the massage gun, because of the, as you say, the point, it's literally pushing this point down so that the muscles can release.
Yeah. Let me just to clear some of that up. All right. You're onto it. Okay. So with what you're born with are all these fibers that are in line with each other in parallel fashion. And then when you injure a muscle or a tendon or ligament, you know, they get interrupted. And now what we call fibroblasts, which is basically collagen, scar tissue,
Mm,
when it comes, it lays itself down at random.
mm,
And that's where we have a hard time because then we lose the flexibility and the extensibility and the of the muscle and the flexibility of it. Okay. So what we want is we want a muscle to be able to shorten and lengthen.
mm,
Okay. Now that's part of the physical makeup of soft tissue.
mm.
All right. That we can see when you're looking down at a steak on your dinner plate,
Yeah.
you're looking at the cross cut of a muscle. That muscle is made up of muscle fibers
Mm,
that you're looking at and you're eating them, right?
mm,
Those muscle fibers are made up of microscopic muscle fibers. Okay.
mm,
Now that is everything that you just talked about.
mm.
Okay. Now, where this comes in is the next level below that. Once again, you're looking at the steak, you're looking at the muscle fibers.
Yeah.
The muscle fibers are made up of microscopic muscle fibers called myofibrils. What are they made up of? They're not made up of microscopic muscle fibers. They're made up of strands of protein.
Okay.
So the muscle fibers and the myofibrils, the microscopic ones, they're contractile tissue. Exactly what they said. They shorten, they lengthen. But what the myofibrils are made up, the strands of protein, that's not contractile tissue.
Mm,
That's not something that shortens and lengthens, but they slide on each other. Okay. As we get older, we dry out.
okay.
Okay. Okay. And they don't slide as efficiently and they get caught
Okay.
on each other. So there's strands of proteins that are caught on each other.
Okay.
Okay. Not every fiber has strands of proteins that are caught on each other. So the muscle works, but the more muscle fibers that we can activate through percussion or
Uh,
oscillation, the more releases of those adhesions,
yeah.
those knots, and then the more efficient the muscle will fiber. The more efficient it is, the more strength, the more power, the more endurance, and maybe most key, probably the better balance that you have, which is such a huge issue with people our age.
Okay, so Gary, we were talking about the massage gun. I get it. Thanks for explaining that. But this one has a couple of different heads.
Mm.
You know, when would you use these different heads, and what would you use them for?
Yeah, I think probably the easiest explanation. I mean, when you look at them, okay, this one is a very narrow tip. Okay. So if you have really point tenderness, this would be great.
Mm,
But if it's more diffuse, okay, because when you have these knots, some of them, and maybe probably an earlier one, and that's projection. I don't know that for a fact, but as it starts out small. You get it early, you can really, release it. But if you didn't, and more and more of those strands keep getting stuck on each other, now you kind of have a wider adhesion, and maybe a wider head would be better suited
yeah.
to get the therapeutic effect you're looking for.
Okay, so percussion, vibration.
Yeah.
Let's talk about heat
Okay.
and cold,
Okay.
temperatures. Again, you were sort of saying this to get blood flowing. It's cold, it's heat. So, how does that work?
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's very simply put. Let's say thermotherapy, thermo hot. So hot therapy using heat.
Yeah.
Okay. Why would you want to do that? Why? How? what for, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Kobe.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so when we apply heat, okay, to your body, what you have is what we call a vasodilation. We talk about vasodilation, okay, or vasoconstriction. We're talking about blood vessels.
Mm.
Dilation, making blood vessels larger,
Mm.
constriction, making them smaller. Okay. So why would you want to use heat to make vessels larger? Simply put, to bring more blood flow into an area.
Okay.
Okay. Why would you want more blood flow into an area? Because there's stuff in the blood that we want to supply our cells with. One would be oxygen.
Mm.
Okay. The more oxygen that we supply, the more efficient we can supply the muscles with what they need. This is going to get real confusing when we ever get to the red light
Okay.
therapy. Okay. But we'll save that. We'll save that
Save that for
argument.
another
We'll save
episode.
that, okay, and then you clue me in. You remember when you said about the oxygen? There has to be a God because nobody can make something this complex. Okay. So anyway, we're looking for vasodilation, and the reason why is because we want to bring more blood flow to an area to warm that tissue up, to make it more pliable, more efficiently, give the cells what they need.
Mm.
So why would we want to constrict that? Okay. So, which would be the cold, because the cold is going to constrict us. Well, several reasons. One, we talked about acute injuries earlier where we want to put cold because we're trying to restrict blood flow right now, okay? Because we don't want swelling
Okay.
to occur. There's some other things that ice does that's really interesting. It slows down nerve impulses.
Mm.
Okay. So a lot of times when you feel pain and when you put ice on it, the the pain subsides,
Yeah.
okay, because you're slowing the impulses
Mm.
is down. You're also sending messages to the central nervous system that kind of confuses the central nervous system a little bit about the message that's coming in. And um, there's cryotherapy right now is gigantic
Mm.
in the athletic setting, whether it's full body ice immersion, going into cryo tanks, cryo rooms, all this stuff. Some people do very, very well with it.
Mm.
Okay. Some people absolutely love it. Other people hate it.
Mm.
Okay. There is a disease called Raynaud's disease. You'll find out pretty quick whether you have it or not, because if you can be allergic to cold. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But you'll find out pretty fast. What happens is your vessels go into spasm. It's not a
Okay.
good thing. Okay. So it's not for everyone. Okay. But it's for most people. Do very well with cold. Okay. Now, maybe the best thing, I mean, I didn't pull this belt out, you did.
Mm.
But why don't we go ahead and talk? I don't have one, okay, but maybe I should, because the thing I like about it is that it does both.
Yep.
Okay. This thing does cryotherapy and thermotherapy.
Yeah.
Okay. So who cares, right?
Yeah.
If you want a cold belt, go get a cold belt. You want a hot belt, go get a cold. So
What
why
would
would you
Kobe
want,
say?
yeah, why would
Why?
you want both, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Interestingly enough, we call that contrast treatment.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you know me, I'm data driven. Okay. To be honest with you, contrast treatment I've been around almost 50 years now in this business. And to my knowledge, there's data, but there's nothing definitive. And there's even some studies that negate it, you know what I mean?
Mm.
But in my clinical experience, contrast treatment goes a long way.
Mm.
So why would you want to do that? What I mean by that is why would you want to use cold and hot intermittently
Mm.
instead of one or the other?
Mm.
Use them both.
Mm.
Now, what you want to do is you want to use cold first. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So the inquiring mind, Kobe's mind, will go, well, why?
Yeah.
I want to use hot first. No, you got to use cold first. Well, why? Tell me why. I'll tell you why. Okay. Because if the idea is to bring more blood flow in to get vasodilation, you will get a greater vasodilation if you get a constriction first.
Okay.
It's sort of like your body's defense mechanism to hypothermia.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you constrict those vessels, okay, with the cold, and then you put heat on them, and they go pow, they open up, and they rush all this blood flow to wherever that heat pack is.
Okay.
Okay. If you're in a cryo chamber, okay, it it's that on steroids in the sense that it's so cold in that chamber that your body thinks you're going to die.
Mm,
And so it shunts all the blood from your extremities into your vital organs to keep you alive.
mm,
And then you get out of the chamber into the warm environment, and your body says, "Oh, I'm not going to die." Okay. And because those vessels in your extremities have constricted, they're going to open up wider. All this blood that's been shunted into your vital organs is going to rush out into your extremities, and it's going to deliver all these nutrients and oxygen to the cells in the rest of your body. And in theory, going to make you feel a lot better. And a lot of people swear by it. Okay.
So with this belt as well, and again, as you said, um, what about compression? So what would compression do for your back, for example? So I use it when I'm playing tennis. I put it round, and it feels very comfortable.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's doing anything for me.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I mean, we certainly, like we talked about the ankle sprain, where you're really trying to
Yeah,
compress because you're trying to stop swelling.
yeah,
Okay. I'm not sure that's where this is coming from, but there's just a lot of times when tightness, okay, offers support,
mm,
and the support itself feels better. And so now you're combining support with heat, or support with cold, or support with contrast.
mm.
Okay. And I think it kind of forces you into a better posture.
Okay,
Okay. And at the same time, you're getting some therapeutic benefit from the therapy, okay, along with the compression. That would be my logical, it make you feel better, and sometimes just, we had God bless the soul of one of our dogs that passed, but he hated the fireworks.
mm,
Like literally, he was a big dog.
mm.
Okay, he's half Great Dane, half Pit. And he would try to crawl under a 4-inch sofa, you know. But one of the things that helped him calm down were these like heavy blankets, compression blankets that put a lot of weight. It's a weighted blanket. Okay. And I think it's sort of the same kind of thing, that sometimes that compression, that weight that you put on your body just makes you feel better,
Yeah,
you know? And it can be sensory in nature. Um, and maybe the sensory thing causes some therapeutic effect in terms of endorphins, and
mm.
sort of that's kind of, it might be a stretch. I don't know. Okay. But if it feels good, do it. If it doesn't, don't,
Yeah.
you know?
Gary, I'd just like to say thank you. And I'd like to say to the audience, if you've got questions for Gary, please keep writing in. And then we'll try and grab those questions for you, and Gary will be happy to sort of answer them. So thanks very much, and tune in to our next episode.